we're told that ignorance of the law is no excuse. But it will be impossible to read all the laws that are on the book today because they're just too voluminous. But when laws are made, they first appear as a slip law, which is just the law itself, by itself, in a little envelope type thing. And then those every year are entered into well, they're in the Federal Register because that's notice to the public. And then they go into volumes called the statutes at large. And they go in by date. Okay. And of course, it's very difficult to find something because you would have to know the date the law was enacted.
Right.
So to make it easier to find, they're then codified in the case of United States laws, they go into the United States Code. And it's actually a finding aid. And the actual law is what started out in that slip law and is in the statutes at large. When they're codified, sometimes they're not presented exactly as you would think. They're supposed to be, but there's a few little things that are done along the way that skew the equation. And but the idea is to make it easier to find the law. So if you wanted to find something on education, you'd go to Title 20. Banking and finance, money and finance, you go to 31, I think it is. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms are in 27. The income tax is in Title 26. And of course, that's the one that affects us the most because it hits us in the pocket. And these are then put in there, and those volumes are divided into chapters and sometimes sub-chapters. And one of the things that's used I believe, to deceive us is the use of legal terms which are sometimes called words of art. And if any place in that title there is a definition of a word or phrase, or combination of words, that definition becomes its meaning. And it could apply to the entire title, or to just a certain paragraph, or to a certain chapter, or even to a sub-paragraph. It has nothing to do with what's in the dictionary, or even what's in the law dictionary, Black's Law Dictionary. The definition that Congress writes is the definition that must be followed. And of course, I think we spoke earlier of you were saying some examples of how it could be very misleading. And just to give a couple more, a person, well, you think of a person as another human being, but a person can also be an individual, an estate, a trust, a partnership, or a corporation. Right?
But does that necessarily mean that they get the same benefits under the law that a person would get?
Sometimes they actually do.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We've had cases that have come up where that, where that was a debate.
Yeah, corporations
want to be persons because it could benefit them for some reason.
And in other words, like individual, we think that means a human being, but an individual really means a unit of one. You could have an individual pancake on your plate, right? That's not a human being. If they want to be perfectly clear, they would say natural person.
Right.
The other example, it's in 7701 of the Internal Revenue Code. It says the term husband. You know what a husband is, right?
Yeah.
Do you need to have do you need a definition? Well, husband shall be read as wife, and wife shall be read as husband. Now, isn't that the opposite of what you were thinking, right? And of course, one that you mentioned, a student. We think of a student.
As someone who's in academia going to school.
Yeah, you're going to college, you're attending classes, you're going to lectures, you're taking exams, right? And you're, say, a resident of Connecticut, right? Permanently. Right? You're a permanent resident.
So.
You've lived here all your life. Right? That's not what a student means. In 7701 B5D, student means an individual who is temporarily in the United States. Doesn't say they have to go to school or have books or take tests. They just have to be here temporarily.
So they could be illegal.
They could be anything.
They can be anything. But what is the advantage? You're saying that because the words are written this way, it creates loopholes in that specific law
it misleads
that
us.
Could say, gee, you can open the door to say that A is B, so therefore it can favor someone?
Well, you had mentioned in the last show the term United States, and there are more than 50 different definitions of United States in the United States Code. Some apply to the whole volume, others apply to just certain chapters, some to just certain paragraphs. The narrowest definition of United States that I could find was that United States means the continental shelf. Well, that's underwater. Right? Now, it was in a section that dealt with drilling oil wells.
Okay.
Now, if a person was reading a law and they were drilling for oil in Kansas, they're 1,000 miles from any ocean, right? And they say there's hereby imposed a tax on oil wells drilled in the United States. They would assume that they owed money.
Right.
Now, but it's really talking about offshore drilling.
Oh, so everybody in Kansas doesn't pay any tax on their oil? I don't think so.
Well, the thing is, they're probably paying it, even though it doesn't apply to them.
Okay.
And
so the point is that there's something to be said for the words that we use, and how accurate they are, and how understandable they are to the common person. Because we, the people, should understand our laws.
Yes. Well, there's a maxim in law that every law student learns in their first semester, and that's the doctrine of void for vagueness. If a law is written in such a way that a person of average intelligence can't understand it, then it's no law at all. It's void. Just like an unconstitutional law is void from the day it is written. It has no force and effect of law.
Okay.
So if we're to understand the law, we'll give you an example. Suppose the speed limit on the highways was posted in Chinese.
Okay.
In America. Right?
You can go whatever speed you want, I guess.
Well, yeah, because you can't be expected to learn
Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese in order to drive on the roads in your own country.
Right.
So that would be void for vagueness.
Okay.
But there's a thing in the book of Isaiah in the Bible, and I wrote it down because I don't want to misquote it. It says, "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And isn't that exactly what they're doing?
So mean what you say and say what you mean is the whole kind of encompassment of what's going on.
And then there are other things that are used to, I believe, to confuse us. You know the trick that a magician does with a deck of cards? Take a card, any card, don't show me the card, put it back in the deck. And then to make it more difficult to find, what do?
Well, they tell you to shuffle the deck or something.
They shuffle the deck.
Yeah.
Well, this is done in our laws. And see if I could give you an example. Originally, the Revenue Code had a Section 22 that was entitled Gross Income. But the code has been revised several times. And gross income was in 22, but when they revised the code, they put it in Section 61. And they retitled it Gross Income Defined, and then went on to list different items of income. And then in that revision, 22 then became the elderly and disabled. So now if you read the law in the original edition of the code, and you said, well, I know the law, it's right here in 22.
Right.
But no, it's not. It's something about people with disabilities. Right? So that's a way of shuffling it. The other thing they do is...
do they have to notify you? I mean, I would assume we'd be notified that there was a change to the code.
Well, the thing is, the statutes at large always supersede the code. The code is just a finding aid.
Oh, okay.
So, of course, the other thing they do with each revision, in the case of this particular section, it originally said gross income is all income unless excluded by law. In other words, some income was not to be included in gross income.
Yeah. Then you'd have to go find out what
law they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when they revised it, they changed that to gross income is all income and includes the following items. And they omitted unless excluded by law, but they put a footnote that you could look up the footnote and it would say unless excluded by law. But then the next revision, they eliminated the footnote. Now the law didn't change. The original law still is still in the statutes at large.
Right.
And that has...
But it's not applicable because it's been revised.
No. The law was not changed. Only the way it was arranged and worded and placed in the code was changed. And because this didn't make it any clearer. If anything, it obscured things. And then, of course, another method it's used is if you had a teacup in your house and you threw things like paper clips and a sewing needle and a rubber band and odds and little things. Everybody has one of these that they throw things in. And you needed a sewing needle, you probably have a pretty easy time finding it in that teacup.
Right.
But if you buried it under a haystack, it'd be a lot more difficult to find.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of how that's done. There's a section 861 in the code, and that deals with sources of income, where the income comes from.
Yeah.
And the original, well, it's a fairly long section. It's 2 pages, which is fairly long in the Revenue Code. And it had, I don't know, close to a dozen pages of regulations that implement it, because there is a section 6001 that says that we're to follow all regulations that the Secretary may from time to time prescribe. Well, they mean the Secretary of the Treasury. You have these codified sections, but then each one of those usually has a implementing regulation, and you're supposed to follow the regulation, and the regulation is supposed to put meat on the bone. It can't change the law, but it can explain, maybe give examples of how it is applied.
Yeah.
And make it more clear. Like you could have...
it doesn't sound like it's being made a lot more clear. It sounds like we have way too many.
Well,
when you have to create a whole industry to read and interpret something. I mean, I understand that everything needs to grow and that things change in time. And that, but if you have to create a whole industry just to read something that you keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, and you put layer upon layer upon layer, everybody knows the bigger it gets, the worse it is, because you can't find anything
unmanageable
anymore. That's right. It becomes unmanageable. Hence why a lot of people are saying we need to change that whole entire system.
Yes. Well, the regulations for that section have, in one of these revisions, have been expanded. The law didn't change, but Congress, the Secretary, decided to expand on the regulations to 94 pages. Now, what, to make it clearer? Obviously it didn't. I defy anybody to read the 94 pages and have any idea what, because it's all in legalese.
Yeah, it's all in legalese. That's right. And then we wonder why, a few people can navigate through it so well, because it's not common knowledge.
Yes, that's right.
The only good thing is that we have the internet, so you hope that the information that gets fed into it, you know what I mean, helps to clarify some of these things, but it doesn't take care of what seems to be the underlying problem, which is it's just too big.
But it's your responsibility to know it.
That is true, and I believe that when you sign your return, don't you then state that
under penalties of perjury that it's correct
you understand?
And true.
And I don't. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I go through a lot of it, and some of the stuff I can figure out, and it's pretty simple. It's been simplified for me, but in general, could I no.
Well, the former commissioner Shirley Peterson said that the code is an impenetrable maze, not even understood by tax professionals or the government employees that are administering it.
Yeah, I heard that quote.
But I want to leave with one of my favorite things.
Okay.
We're told, and this isn't a joke, this is true, unfortunately. We're told that if you want to express yourself, if you're writing, you use short, concise sentences. Well, a sentence has to begin, at least I was told, it had to begin with a capital letter, had to express a complete thought, and then it had to end with either a period or an exclamation point or a question mark. Right? Well, I found a sentence in the Internal Revenue Code. It's in section 3121B, and it's the first sentence. Right? If that definition of a sentence is correct, then this one has 3,742 words. Goes on for pages. Yeah. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I did. I mean, it should be in the Guinness Book of. I mean, I'm sure there's no sentence longer anyplace in the world, but it deals with employment, and it talks about foreign. And I have to read this part because there's so many foreign agricultural workers in the Bahamas and Jamaica and the British West Indies, college clubs, fraternities, sororities, children under the age of 18, domestic service in a private home, American vessels and aircraft, the American Institute in Taiwan, the National Guard, the Coast Guard, the President, Vice President, and Senior Executive Service, a whole bunch of judges, justices, and magistrates of various courts, members and delegates of Congress, penal institutions, interns, student nurses, other medical and dental residents, fire, storm, earthquakes, other emergencies, the government of Guam and American Samoa, fire, snow, floods, elected officials, ordained ministers, religious orders, foreign governments, individuals delivering newspapers and shopping news, magazines, tenants in land, livestock, fur-bearing animals, bees, wildlife, communist organizations, the Philippines, and non-resident aliens in fishing boats.
Well, they're not all getting taxed, so it can't be that they're all getting taxed.
Now, is that clear?
Yeah, very crystal clear. Crystal clear. Well, you know, it gives you a newfound appreciation for the people who start to say we need to simplify.
Yes.
You know, well, and we need to have we the people need to have a better grasp on where we are, and but more importantly, where we would like to go.
Right.